thank you for your attendance this evening. I wanted to cover a few materials you should have received at the sign-in table, and if you didn't have an opportunity to sign in yet, please do so. It's important for us to gauge the attendance as well as we want to be able to have your contact information to keep you informed on the project. But you should have received a fact sheet when you signed in, a just basic overview of the project itself and some timelines. Again, as I mentioned, it's extremely important for us this evening to receive your input and comments. So we do have a comment form. You can fill this comment form out this evening, leave it in the mailbox at the sign-in table, or you can take it with you. And as we conclude our presentation this evening, there'll be other ways in which you can comment as well, and the comment period will end on October 31st. Most importantly, we want to be able to get through the presentation, so we ask that you hold your questions. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, to please write them down on the question card. You can hold that up at any time during the presentation. I'll come around and I'll gather those cards from you, and once the presentation concludes, I'll essentially be reading your questions, and our team here will be addressing the questions. Again, if you don't want to write a question down, we can, again, always address your questions back at those roll plots and go through more of that open house style format too, totally up to you. But I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Celeste Garza with Pinal County, and she will go ahead and introduce our study team and some other dignitaries that are here this evening.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here tonight. You will not find a team of individuals ranging from public officials, county management, local agencies, and engineering consultants more passionate about transportation of those of this study team that you see here tonight. We have some elected officials with us here tonight, and I wanted to introduce our Pinal County Board of Supervisor for District 2, Supervisor Mike Goodman. Did you want to come up and say a couple words?
I appreciate you referring to me as a dignitary. I don't get that at home. So thank you, Celeste. Neil Carter's back here. He's our state representative from Santan Valley. We appreciate you being here, Neil. For the past 7 years since I've been your county supervisor for this area, traffic and other infrastructure has been a big passion of mine. From our utility issues all the way through our roads and infrastructure. One thing that was surprising to me when I first took office was the amount of potential growth. And I mean properties that had already been platted, ready to go further south. And the biggest problem we had was our overtaxing roads that we currently have. And so the need to move forward on a project like this, you know, it was amazing to me when I first got into office was that the north-south freeway that we've been talking about was discussed almost 40 years ago. Mr. Dobson, you would remember this. And that alignment that was discussed was the meridian alignment, coming off of the 24, going down to the freeway at Rittenhouse, or to the railroad tracks, following the railroad tracks down to Attaway, and then across. Now, could you imagine where we would have been if they would have stayed with that particular plan 40 years ago? We wouldn't be in the situation we are today. So with that being said, as you look at the maps, and I agree with Celeste, we've got a tremendous staff and consultants that we've been dealing with over the years, and I appreciate a lot of you that, a lot of our developers and builders and that have been engaged on what we're doing and where we're trying to head. And especially to our public, you guys are the ones that actually live here. You're where the rubber meets the road. And so as you're going through the process today, ask the questions. Ask them. Any problems you see, present them, talk about it. That's what we're here for. And so I appreciate y'all being here, and thank you. And we'll go ahead and proceed from there.
All right. Our study team has been a very collaborative effort between many agencies, including the Arizona Department of Transportation, the town of Queen Creek, the city of Apache Junction, and the town of Florence. There's also several member agencies that have been included in all of the communication and coordination, which includes the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Army National Guard, the Rittenhouse location, the Arizona State Land Department, Maricopa Association of Governments, the Central Arizona Association of Governments, Central Arizona Project, which owns and operates the canal, Salt River Project, who has many utilities in the corridor, and a host of many others. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Berwin Wilbrink. Back in 2020, the county hired the Dibble and Jacobs engineering team to begin preliminary engineering documents on the State Route 24 and the Central Arizona Parkway. Berwin's going to give you a great story over the last 15 years of how we have come to where we are today. Berwin?
You can say he doesn't look that old.
It's like, huh. You know, we're going to try and second guess your questions. So this isn't me. This technically is you. You're saying, hey, Berwin, what's the purpose of this project? What is the need and what is the intent? What are you hoping to accomplish? And so that's where we're starting from. So the purpose and need for this, as we're talking about this transportation facility, is to respond to the transportation demand that's incredibly overwhelming this part of the Santan Valley by recent and future development, serve the projected build out of north central Pinal County, provide a managed access facility. Managed access means, you know, the restricted access in terms of what we're using it for, not right in, right out access all over the place, but managed so that we have a higher capacity and a higher volume using that facility, transportation facility to improve efficiency, develop a solution that avoids existing and planned developments as much as possible. Although you look at our maps, it's kind of hard for us to avoid everything, but we're doing our best to try and find the areas that we can push to the sides. Okay? Certainly enhance the safety and improve the operational performance. Okay? As was mentioned, this is not something that has been started recently. When we started looking at these improvements for the last 15, 20 years, many of you may have been to several of the different meetings that's been held to talk about the improvements. So as we look at this particular area, that's the big picture in 15 years. These are all the different kinds of planning studies that our various agencies and partners have participated in. These are studies that look at projected traffic numbers, where the development's going to be, where the people are going to be growing, how much is coming into the area. The first one on the top is Pinal County's regionally significant routes. Back in 2008, they shared with you a vision for how this area would get developed. Look at all the particular routes that are proposed between Santan and 79 in the ultimate future. Okay, this is down the ways, but we have to plan for that kind of development, because if we don't plan for it, you know it's going to happen, and we have to have those provisions in place. So just one example of what the county has been doing in terms of looking at the future. ADOT has come up with several different studies. Many of you may have participated in the realignment of US 60 going around the festival grounds and looking at a different route for that. ADOT then continued at looking initially at SR 24, extending it to Florence Junction and all points east. We had several different corridors and concepts that looked at that. Then we've already mentioned the north-south corridor. The north-south corridor you see is a single alignment now, but it had all sorts of these different alternatives that were considered at the time when these different alternatives were being developed. So on our graphics, we've kind of shown where those corridors have kind of gone to and where the north-south is shown, where SR 24, we believe, working with state lands and ADOT, will be going and looking at some of those improvements. Now, together, that serves a great regional solution, okay? Understanding that the north-south goes from 60 all the way to I-10, all right? Great regional solution, but, you know, we're looking, let's see if this will work. All right. We're looking at all the congestion that's going on in this particular area, okay? So that's the north central Pinal County that we're really focused on tonight and with these improvements, okay? So with those other studies, we throw all the alternatives up. You can see there were alternatives that considered making the north-south, making other improvements on the west side of the CAP. And that became the starting blocks for some of our alternatives as to where we were going with these, okay? So what we have shown in the back is a series of alternatives that, frankly, with the criteria we've given you, trying to fit a capacity that's not on top of somebody's home or on top of existing development. But you know, you can tell that that pretty much just pushes us almost all the way over to the CAP, all right? Now, granted, there's quite a bit of room still next to the CAP, and that's where we've shown it, and that's where we're trying to fit this facility. As we get further to the south, SRP has some infrastructure that's going next to the canal and doesn't allow us to fit that particular corridor through that area. SRP is making provisions for the same thing that the highway departments are doing. They're trying to meet your power needs. And so there's generation stations, there's a combination of solar, there's gas being built there for new generating stations as well as other power facilities. So that kind of made it difficult for us to continue the corridor. So we came up with several different alternatives. So when you look at those different alternatives, you know, we had to look at, well, how do we come up with the starting spot for these things? You know, why is the traffic really a problem here? Is this where we have to start from? Where's everybody going and where do the roads have to truly be? Okay, well, in this particular part of the valley, north central Pinal County, it's really one of those areas that's been growing up. It's drawn all these new people here for homes, but there's not an awful lot of awful lot of employment. That's changing. Pinal County is working with that to get jobs down here. But most of you right now, only 2% that live in the area, work in the area, 5% come into it, but 93% of you, for the most part, go into and out of the Santan Valley area, okay? That's where all that traffic is on Ironwood and Ellsworth and Meridian, and you see it in the mornings going one way, you see it in the afternoons going the other, and that's what we're trying to make the provisions for, is to make that a high capacity means of getting all the way to the south. So some of these maps and some of these exhibits, they're kind of hard to see. I'm going to try and blow them up a little bit. But if we were to look today, with the traffic today, and take a look at this road network, and we look at what the traffic is projected to do in the next 25 to 30 years, okay? Now, the crystal ball that we're using is taking into account if the plats that are already with the county and already developed, okay, is already being planned, if that traffic were to come into here, how would the streets look like if we just built it on the existing street network, okay? So you can see that things like Ellsworth in 20, granted, this is not today, this is in 25 to 30 years. But if we don't build anything else, Ellsworth would be at over 79,000 vehicles per day. Meridian Road, 90,000 vehicles per day. Ironwood, Gansel, 100,000 vehicles per day. Now, one of the things you look over here and you happen to notice that this is what a typical street, a city street, can handle, okay? So if we put in a 6-lane street Most of the time we call it a 7-lane street because of the turn lane, okay? But 3 lanes in each direction. That street can only handle about 50,000 vehicles per day, all right? If we were to make every single one of the north-south streets 7-lane streets, we still wouldn't have enough capacity to bring the amount of traffic that's heading to the south, okay? That's kind of a staggering fact. But everyone's like, well, let's just make the arterials bigger. When we make the arterials bigger, we have to widen it out. That takes away the homes. When we add those arterials, we also have to put more driveways in. More driveways is more access points. More access points is to slow the traffic down. So it kind of goes against the flow of how we're trying to do a high capacity facility. So we're trying to find a location where we can put a higher capacity facility without all those delays, okay? So Hunt Highway, the same thing, 100, 110, 120, okay? So looking at that traffic in the future, the red lines are what's volume to capacity. In other words, the existing facility, if it was to be how much it could handle and how much it will have to handle. Basically, everything is overwhelmed into the future, okay? If we were to look at building something like the parkway that we're proposing, here's 24, here's the parkway going along the CAP. If we were to build something like this, okay, look at the kind of impacts it has on the rest of the street network. All of a sudden, the other streets aren't so overwhelmed, okay? Granted, there's still some red lines on east-west because we're going north-south, and those of you that have to go east-west, there's limited opportunities. But look at the rest of the network, how much improved it gets. It's a major improvement to the area, and that's basically our goal. Click. Okay. Click. I was deep in thought. So, with those challenges, what kind of a facility are we looking at? What is a parkway? Is it a street? Is it a freeway? What are some of the options that we're looking at? Okay, this is what's called a typical section of what SR 24 looks like today. Okay, it has the 2 lanes on the outsides. We haven't built the bridges yet, but we're taking advantage of the right-of-way and having 4 lanes of traffic on that facility, okay? That's what 24 would be continued. We would continue that to the CAP canal, okay? And then that would the same thing, we would take that type of a roadway and continue it parallel to the canal down to Ocotillo. That's what we're showing as phase 1, okay? That phase 1 would be built at grade, same way that SR 24 is built today. We would build the bridges in the future that would go over at Germain and Ocotillo, okay? But in the meantime, we would get ourselves almost 5 miles of highway all the way down to Ocotillo to help with the traffic movement. It also allows for future expansion into the median to make that a 6-lane facility in the future. Okay, so that's the blue lines that we're talking about. You can see the dots. Ironwood has the interchange already. There would be eventually an interchange here, which is just a connection between the Parkway and SR 24. SR 24, as I mentioned earlier, ADOT's working with the county to continue it initially to the north-south and then ultimately looking at tying that into US 60. So, but this is what we've been describing in this as phase one. The interchanges are on Germain and Ocotillo initially. They're 2 miles apart, okay? Federal highways, from a safety perspective, prefers that when we look at these high capacity facilities, that we put the interchanges 2 miles apart, not 1, okay? Now, how many of you have gotten on to try to get on, with 1 mile between interchanges on the superstition, and you just simply don't have enough room to merge and weave, especially for those that try to get on and at the same time someone else is trying to get off. And so for all of these, we're looking at a 2 mile spacing between the interchanges, okay? And work with the development to make certain all the arterials collect at those points. Continuing, again, we're against the CAP. The reason we're against the CAP, there's no corridor anywhere further to the west for us to build something. So we're snug up to the CAP, but you can see where the Queen Creek Wash is, where we have existing developments, we still have quite a bit of room to put that facility adjacent to those existing homes and existing communities. With the environmental document, we also do studies for noise and air. So things like noise walls will be considered as we build these improvements, so we mitigate the fact that it's something new coming next to your community, okay? The argument that I moved here 20 years ago and I don't want it to be an urban area, that's a good argument, but all your neighbors moved in, and that's why we're trying to bring a facility in here. We're trying to make it as quiet and as accommodating as we can, so we'll do the noise improvements and the other improvements we're talking about, and we've pushed it to the side so we take the least amount of impacts. Now, when we get to Skyline, that's the last interchange that we have room to build, and we'll continue to make that a divided intersection just like Ironwood and what you're used to. But as we look to the south, all of these different areas that are different, that are colored in, those are developments that already have plans, okay? And you can see that there's an awful lot of developments already platted, plans are underway, construction's underway, and it's very tight for us to do something like an expressway that requires about 150 to 200 feet of right-of-way. So what we're looking to do from Skyline to the south and still provide a high-capacity corridor is to use a parkway. And the parkway would stay at grade. In other words, it's at the ground. It doesn't have bridges. It doesn't have ramps, okay? But the parkway works where there's still 4 lanes, 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south, but we really limit the amount of delays to those 2 directions. For example, at all the intersections, we only allow 2 phases, east-west and north-south. All the left turns are pushed onto the side streets. That eliminates a lot of red time so that there's the maximum amount of green time on the parkway. We'll show you how that works. The Arizona Parkway is a new facility being used in Tucson, western Maricopa County. It came initially from Michigan. It's called the Michigan Left. So something good came from the snowbirds. Oh, we're being recorded. Sorry, don't say that. So that's the system. It's been tried and true. And so what does that kind of a facility look like? All right, it's a divided at-grade facility. All right, it still allows development and access to the subdivisions by allowing right in and right out. So if you're coming along the parkway, you're headed north, you can go right in, you can go right out, okay? That doesn't slow down the traffic. It's the left turns that slow down the traffic. And so what happens when we come to the major intersections on a parkway, we make everybody turn right. So the first opportunity for a left turn pocket, make them do a U-ey, and they can either continue on their merry way on the left, or they can actually come back on to the facility. okay? So it makes the travel a little bit longer for the locals that want to go in the opposite direction. But it allows us to have a facility that we can fit on something like, on the map that's shown here, what the red line is showing is we have an example where there's development proposed, okay, and we have an SRP subdivision our substation that's already in place, okay? The county doesn't have the money to buy out that substation, all right? So we have to compress the roadway to 2 lanes in each direction, okay, with no left turn. So it's just 4 lanes and a small little median, okay? But when we get to the north of it, then we'll come back and add the U-turns to make the left turns at the intersections, okay? So it'll still allow you to go on the way that you wish to go. It just gives the precedence to the north-south traffic. The neat thing is, it's a 45-mile-an-hour facility. It's a high-capacity facility, much higher than we would do if we were to put in a 7-lane road, an arterial with the traffic signals and the other facilities and infrastructure. We're working with the developers to make certain that we have room for the U-turns and trying to put this in such a location where it basically fits. Our goal is to get the Johnson Ranch traffic that needs to get to the Highway Expressway, get it through this area and connect it so everybody can go north and south as efficiently as possible. So, another inquisitive guy, okay? Are the alignments the only things you look at? Is it just the alignment, and is it just homes, and is it just traffic? Okay, so we have a lot of different factors that we have to, that influence the selection. Okay. This is an anti-environmental presentation. Because environmental is NEPA, and NEPA is a 4-letter word. So, it didn't say that either. So there's several things that we look at when we look at these corridors, and you ask yourself, well, gee, why does it take so much time? It's just simple traffic. Put the construction down there and do it, okay? When we clear these things, there's an awful lot of studies that have to go into play, particularly cultural studies that go into place as to what was underground, especially when we're using federal funds. And the county is working to get federal funds through grants. That's why we have to go through these processes. This is where your noise walls come into play, the floodplains come into play, protection of wetlands, protection of endangered species, migratory birds. All of that stuff comes into play in terms of how the corridor impacts our environment. Not just the birds and the bunnies, but your impacts as well. That's where the air, the noise, socioeconomic, environmental justice issues, all of that comes into play as to how we look at where that alignment would come into play. So working together with that process, and frankly, that's what we're doing right now with this study, is to take the environmental, your input goes into the document as the public feedback. Whether you like it or not, we want your comments and give us the opportunity to see what your thoughts are. But it helps us, encourages us to incorporate your ideas, your factors. We had a couple of other ideas that, Celeste initially thought they were crazy, but now, they're sounding like they're pretty good. Is that the way to? No, I didn't say it that way. Okay, we're having fun. But, you brought your ideas, other people have brought ideas tonight that we're going to possibly be changing some things, all right? Because the public influence is what we're looking at, all right? And that's how this public input comes into play, the social impacts come into play, working with the community. All of this still comes into it as to when we're talking about this. So, what does it look like? We have an exhibit on the back that doesn't just have the corridors drawn as a solid line. We've superimposed the aerial and put the line work on it. It's still a small scale, but you can see it in the back of the room. These exhibits will be loaded on the county's website, and you can zoom in and see a little bit better what they look like as you go through. So you're coming in off of Ironwood, making the interchange, and then coming down to Germain. We had to get away from, again, the canal because of SRP and the Dinosaur substation. As soon as we pass the Dinosaur substation, we go back to hugging the canal. Continuing from Germain, you can see that we're hugging the canal around the air base, continuing down to Ocotillo. Now, when we do these, we have to make the opportunity, when that Ocotillo is eventually developed, the CAP is going to require that the maintenance roads along the canal are not interfered with. In other words, Ocotillo has to go over not only the canal, but over the maintenance roads. So we'll have, in this case, the highway would stay at grade and the crossroad would go over that facility, okay?
Can you go back?
We cross Queen Creek as close as we can, again, staying adjacent to the canal, or to the canal and SRP. When we made the interchange at Coombs, we made a kind of an angled intersection so it hugs as close as possible, okay? And we're continuing to go down to the south. Here you can see we have Skyline, and so that was the last grade separated interchange. Again, they have the same conditions. We have to worry about maintenance for the canal. That's all issues that we have to deal with in the future, okay? And so then we come on to the new alignment at Quail Run, and so this is where we transition for a grade separated facility to the north, and at Roberts Road going south, this is where it's at grade, okay? So this is where it goes into that parkway, the concept I was talking about, okay? Where the existing developments are, we'll buy the right-of-way on the opposite side of the street. So we'll put the U-turns on the opposite side so we're not taking away anybody's homes to build the U-turns and the loops, okay? We're working with the developers, as I mentioned, where we have the areas where they already have a plan between Judd and Bella Vista, but they've come to the table. Tremendous involvement with the county and the local supervisor. We've had several meetings with the developers to hash out some of these ideas, to get these ideas through. As we come down to Quail Run, one of the concepts, we still have options that we're looking at. So one of the options that we had was to tie in to Magma Road. Other options that we might be looking at is to tie in to Attaway Road. There's several developments down here that we're still working with to see how these solutions can best provide access ultimately to Arizona Farms Road. But somehow or another, we have to get through this area. And so some of those folks are here tonight. We'll continue to work with the county on finding a solution to get down to Arizona Farms Road. Okay? What happens next? Everybody wants to know, when's construction going to start? So it's a process. And I know that many of you have been hearing these meetings and it's like, hey, we have to find the funding. Well, the county is working with the state and various opportunities to find funding through grants, trying to find it through tax opportunities, and to find it through the state and the counties. At the same time, while we're trying to find the funding, we're doing the environmental clearance documents and the other study documents to help clear the path so that when the funding is found, we can actually build the improvements without delay. So it's a hand in glove kind of a thing that we have to do. You can see we have several public meetings. Right now, we're up here. There we are. And so you'll see we have a few more meetings to go through. You'll be invited. If you gave us your contact information, we'll invite you directly to the other public meetings and keep you informed. So, oops, I said that. Funding, yeah. We're looking for it. I said that. Okay. Once we have the funding, we have an implementation plan, and that's that plan that we're basically going from the south down to the, from the north down to the south. So, okay, I'm going to quit asking questions, and now this is you asking questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Brock.
All right. Does anybody have any question cards you'd like us to address now? Like I said, there's different options. Your comments are critical to us, and there's several different ways that you can give us your comments. If you don't want to turn in a question card now, the next step in terms of the part of the presentation would be to go and interact with our study team, and we can address your questions one-on-one at the roll plots. I want to advance the slide, though, because it is important that we do get your comments. So if we don't address your comments in an open setting through Q&A, there's other ways for you to provide comments. Tonight, you should have received a comment card. We would encourage you to fill that out, leave it in the mailbox on your way out tonight. You can also email us comments at the email provided. You can call your comments in as well, and we will record those. You can mail the comments in to the county as well, and those will be documented. And we also have an online component. So there's an online survey that is essentially an online comment card that you can either scan the QR code or go directly to the study website and complete that online comment form. But seeing that there's no question cards, or does anybody have a question card that we can address? Sure.
If you want me to say it, or do you want, because I'm like.
Yeah, you know what?
Okay. Just visual aspects. I know the one picture you showed had the like the roundabout thing, like Ironwood crossing coming over. Any visual pictures that kind of give an idea of what it will look like? Like lights, what type of walls they're going to be? How many lights will you have? What the microphone here?
So, different, okay, repeat the question. What will the facility look, will we have some pictures, animations as to what the facility would look like? What's it gonna look like on the ground? What are the walls gonna look like? And will there be lights? Okay. For safety, when we have the interchanges, there will be lighting, but we are also dark sky compliant. And so the only lighting that we put in is where we have to for the merge and the weaves, okay? In terms of what will the walls and the colors and all that kind of good stuff, I don't pick colors. Okay, the wall height is determined by the noise study in terms of where the receptors are and how high the highway is with respect to other receptors and how far back they are. Okay, that determines the height of the walls. We also sometimes build them on berms so the walls don't look so tall, okay, and it helps take care of our earthwork balance, okay? When we get into final design, there will be opportunities to share with the county ideas as to what the facility would look like. Again, our goal, like 24 to the north, is to keep basically a minimum approach. All right, you didn't see landscaping, you don't see anything else with it. It's to get the most pavement to get people basically onto the facility and out of the valley. Okay, so that's our goal.
Yeah, ma'am.
My question is, how did you come to the 45 mile an hour?
I'm gonna go ahead and repeat it for everybody's benefit here. So the question was how did we arrive at the 45 mile an hour speed limit?
So we're talking about two different kinds of facilities. The facility to the north will eventually have a higher speed to it because it's an access controlled facility. It's similar to a freeway, but ADOT builds freeways. The county doesn't build freeways, so we call it an expressway. It's a freeway. We just call it, and so it has the 55 miles per hour like you do on 24, all right? Once we get down to the parkway, it's simply not safe for us to have speeds in excess of 45. When we put the facility at 45, that's where we have curb, we have gutter, we have other features that keep the right-of-way tight. And we can't have speeds higher than that and still maintain the curbs, the gutters, and the rest of the infrastructure to define the lanes. So it's a safety issue.
Okay. I have a card. I'm going to go ahead and read this question. It seems that option 3E is getting the greatest attention. Will Felix from Arizona Farms Road to the Parkway be part of this project if 3E is chosen? When will final option choice be made? Is 3E most likely?
We're showing you all of the alternatives that we had to make, that we considered. You can also hear that some of those have been eliminated by virtue of SRP, other land development. We still have options, and we're still investigating options, so we don't have a final solution. That's why your feedback is so important. The reason we're talking a little bit more on the alternatives south of Skyline is, frankly, north of Skyline, we don't have any other place to put it, okay? Now, some of you would ask the question, well, why don't you put it on the east side of the canal, okay? On the east side of the canal, we have flood retarding structures and we have a canal to cross. If we talk about the cost of all those bridges and all that infrastructure to get to the other side, we can't afford to build the freeway that we want to build on the west side.
Nor would people go east to go west.
We also have to, make it convenient for people to go. It's too far out of their path. Now, the north-south is a viable regional transportation facility, and that facility will get built. It has a different purpose and need than what we're talking about for the Santan area. Okay, our goal with this facility is purely to get you in and out of the Santan area. Is that right? Good.
Okay.
Chris?
Any other question cards?
What happens on the slide with the white box around the properties? Talk about easement rights, will those houses be annexed, or what's going to happen there with those properties?
So just for the rest, let me see if I get this right.
What you saw on those maps was the plats from the subdivisions. It was their right-of-way property lines. We just got it from a database from the county. Our goal is to minimize taking any private property as best we possibly can. Right now, there's one parcel that's shown on one of the maps. Even that parcel, we're trying to find ways to avoid it. If there's no way for us to avoid the property, then the property will have to be purchased. The property has gone through a pretty in-depth process where you get different assessments, and they work with the property owner to purchase that property.
Are you talking about the white
Right there on Skyline in that neighborhood, the one that's in purple.
White highlighted properties, there it is. What's the significance of that corner? What, 20, 25 properties highlighted?
Yeah.
Where?
It's just showing the property lines, it's not.
See how some of those are highlighted in white?
Oh, the only reason they're highlighted in white is because we actually had from the county the GIS information that shows the property lines. Okay, everywhere else where there's farm fields, some of the developers are doing the same thing, and we'll get the plats eventually. We just don't have them yet.
So the rest of that subdivision,
The rest of the, but we didn't show it because we didn't need it for the purposes of, we know where the subdivision is. Just cut it off. Okay?
So, just specifying the one in slightly purple, looks like line's going by the most northeast house property right there. That one, is that one that's in question that will have to be purchased?
Right there.
Yep. That's the one?
Has to be is not the right word I would use yet. Right now it's in, we are trying to find alternatives. Do you own that house?
Very small area from that location.
Do you own that house?
Right by it.
Well, if you're buying, don't worry about it.
That's terrible.
The only thing we can still come back to, the county has the same problem no matter where we put it. You only have so much room to fit something. We have to find a spot for it. There is not going to be a solution that doesn't have a consequence to somebody.
Massive funding and move it east.
Yeah. But if we were to do that, the traffic numbers just simply don't work.
Right. Anybody have another question card? All right.
So if you got funding today, how long would it take to build it?
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
How many years would it take to actually?
if we had the funding today, it would take a year to finish the design and the environmental and 2 years to do the construction.
3 years, if funding was there.
For segment one, yes.
Right. Ma'am, I don't want to skip over you. I know you had a question.
I just wanted to ask, are there also going to be some solutions to add maybe some extra flood towers out this way? Because we do experience some flooding, across the valley. I know we have a limited number of flood towers in the area, but some of this area along the canal, we do experience flooding on these sub-streets. So I just kind of wanted to ask, where maybe extras of those might be placed.
So the question is related to flood infrastructure as it relates to the parkway, and will flood infrastructure be added accordingly?
So as part of, is this thing on?
Get them closer, almost eat it.
So as part of this project, they have to do drainage analysis and drainage design. So there'll be some drainage infrastructure built with these facilities, mostly to handle the drainage and runoff from the pavement itself, but also to continue and convey that off-site drainage. So this is not a flood control project per se. So certainly the goal would be to not make any flooding worse, but if there's opportunities to make flooding better with small changes to the project, we'll certainly make those changes. Because there will be some infrastructure being built with the roadway. Does that answer your question?
Right. Any other questions? And we have about 30 minutes that we can break out back to the roll plots, and you can interact with our study team members one-on-one. I'll go ahead and leave the slide up as it relates to comments. It's really critical. Even thoughts, comments, question cards are still pertinent as well. If you have questions you would like the team to address, please feel free to reach out, and we'll essentially answer your question just in a different way. But appreciate your attendance tonight. We'll go ahead and answer any other questions out on the floor. Thank you.